It was. It was when the fierce Thanes had assailed heaven, pulling down the great ironwood wall, burning then the very planks of shining paradise. It was when Thor rode off to the far east land, killing the great trolls that had grown into a multitude in the war of heaven. It was when, looking from high Asgard out, the god saw to the south Surt and his fiery legions practice their weapons and their flames, bright and dark. It was when, high in the halls of golden Asgard, the great gods looked north and saw their Thrym and his frost giants, as many as flakes of snow in the storm and as cold-hearted, and saw their eyes glint like ice in snow. It was when the gods glanced east and saw far off the twisting tumult of chaos that lies round Fenris land, and saw beyond the gaping eyes of the wolf himself. It was when the gods in high golden Asgard, climbing to the highest tower, looked down into the abyss, and saw the abyss looking back as the unholy eyes of the Midgard serpent and its twisting tumults engulfed the world. It was then they felt it, eating into their hearts, eating into their souls, destroying their very courage. They felt fear that beat the walls of heaven, fear that entered the golden thatch of Asgard, fear that filled their world and their words and made them hollow in their ears. Even One Eye felt it, although the great gods came to him looking for guidance and counsel. But the recently plucked eye still smarted, and he felt he had no counsel to give, for fear at his soul. Only Tyr stood strong and silent. And when they asked the god of law, he turned to the east. And there they felt suddenly a cold wind. And as they shielded their eyes from the cold wind, it sort of seemed to them, in the shadow they caused on their eyes, an old man was coming. And sure enough, soon up bright Bifrost, a little old man came shuffling. His eyes thick set in his skull, his teeth prominent, his nose wizen, his teeth yellow and jagged. And he came up before the great gods as they were gathered before their ruined walls and said, "How goes it with the gods?" And One Eye replied, "Can you not see? Heaven lies open, and there lies now naught, I think, in the very fates, in the very strength of gods and men, nay, even the Norns, who are now weaving, I'm sure, our fate. A power to rebuild the walls of heaven, to refound them." And then the man, with eyes so deep none could see them, turned to One Eye and said, "Mayhap you found such a power. I could build you walls whose foundations lay in obsidian, whose high stone mullions were greater than Zeus himself, whose final shield wall was made out of the iron wood, sharpened to keep your enemies out, even if it would keep the gods inside. And One Eye said, "Could you do that?" "Surely," said the stranger. And a sudden hope, Odin felt it. A hope that surpasses reason, that eats into the faith of what he knew was true. And he said, "Well, if you could do that, if you could take that burden from me, for the gods would turn to me at last and demand I built the wall, but my power is not what it was. If then you could take that fate from me, I would give you anything, I say, in all of heaven's bright arc." And the old man said, all right, I will do it, but the payment is this, and only this. You must give me the golden apples of the sun, and holy Idun, who grows those apples, who you were promising to bright Baldir. You must give me the apples, and Udin to be my bride. Now One Eye rubbed his sore and aching socket and said, "That price is too high." "Well, it is not high enough," the old man said, "for as well as the golden apples of the sun, as well as Udin, I want the power of sun and moon." And One Eye said, all right, keep your hair on. I'll give you those if you can build those walls in less than a month, 28 days, and do it now, in midwinter. And the old man smiled and said, all right, I will have not just the powers of sun and moon, but all the power of bright heaven's arc, and the apples of the sun that make the gods eternally young, and bright Udin to be my bride. But I will need something else. While I'm building the wall, I want your horse, Fafnir, for only with Fafnir can I build that quickly. And One Eye said, so be it. And so they went before Golden Tyr, who stood as he stands, as he always must stand, to the very end of time, he the wolf's final bane. And they stood before him and they swore their oath that the wall would be built in 28 days, and the price set. And the old man shuffled off. Now there was great consternation amongst the gods, for although fear had eaten into their hearts, they had not forgotten that the golden apples of the sun was what kept them, if not immortal, forever young. And Udin declared that she wanted to marry Balder, while up in the heavens the sun and moon and heaven's arc seemed to grow dark. And only the Norns started to smile, and them that watched them noticed they reached more and more for Skians coloured black. The next day, the old man came, and with him he brought great store of rocks and a huge pickaxe. And although he seemed so small and wizen, he was laying in the foundations. Deep he made them and set them with mighty rocks, as high as hell was deep down. And he reared them up and reared them up and reared them ever high. Seeing that, One Eye grew scared. For, if truth be said, One Eye had never meant to play fair. And he whispered to the dark, and he whispered to the forces of chaos, to that cloak of chaos that the Vanir had given him, and he called up, using that cloak, a mighty earthquake, and the earthquake shook the world, and it shook the heavens, and the high thatch of Asgard fell. But all it did with the foundations was lay them harder and faster. And so it was. By the end of a week and a half, the old man had laid the foundation and was gone. And he was gone for a few days. And all the gods came before Odin and said, "Well, what are you going to do now?" And Odin smiled and said, "Do not worry. I have other charms." And when the old man came back, he carried with him huge boulders, already hafted, each to lock into the other without brick or mortar. And he started to lay them. And the task took long and was hard, for each he had to hammer in carefully. And seeing that, Odin took out the tooth of winter. And with the tooth of winter he called down a mighty hurricane storm. And the snow piled up, and the very sky froze, so that the blue arc of heaven became like an ice rink. But the snow and the ice seemed to make the old man's task even easier, for he slipped up the boulders on the ice and set them fast in the snow, using it as some kind of lubricant. So that in less than a week and a half, a great high rampart of stone was built around bright Asgard as a bulwark to keep the gods inside. And then the old man was gone. And the gods turned to Odin and said, "You think you are so wise? What are you going to do now?" And Odin took out another of his great charms, the scepter of the king of the gods, that would blast any material, organic material turning it to ash, while up in the high bower, the Norns started to weave ever darker hues inside their once bright designs. Soon, the old man came back, and with him, there was a great stack of iron wood. Well, Odin worked the charm that would reduce any wood to ash. Any wood save the iron wood, that it seemed to make harder and yet more supple, more easy to work, for the old man was soon laying the planks all round heaven to build a high rampart, a shield wall, absolutely impregnable from inside and from without. Until on the very last day, his 27th, there was but the gate to design. He had the gates already there. He had the poles. But Odin, perhaps on the very last day, he controlled the sun, have it set very promptly. And the old man said, "Tomorrow I will finish, and then I shall claim my prize. Unden, the apples of the gods that will make me young, while they will have my fate and be forever old. And the power of sun and moon, and the right of heaven's bright arc." And he was gone. And Odin was like a man already defeated, and he rubbed his forehead and sighed, and all the gods sighed, all save one. For just in that moment of misery, a laughter rung out from the back of the hall. "What a merry trap you've set, bright Odin of the one eye. You must have been looking from your blind eye when you made such a bargain, Odin, and the brights of the gods to be ever young, the sun and the moon and heaven's bright arc. What folly led you?" And Odin looked and saw his foster brother, Loki, and said, "I am in no mood for your games. If you have something to say it, or be gone." And Loki said, all right, keep your hair on. "I will undertake to make sure this giant cannot complete the task, but on conditions. I wish that you give each of the charms the cloak of chaos, the orb of the king of the dead, and the tooth of the winter to my 3 children. Hell can be queen of the dead, The wolf, Fenris, my son, may wear the pelt, the cloak of chaos. And my other son, the Midgard serpent, can add an extra fang to his gaping maw. Yes. And what's more, I get to keep whatever I get from the giant tomorrow. Odin looked at him, not trusting. But just then the moon rose, and he felt time was wearing on. It would soon be dawn, and with dawn the old man would come back, and the trap would be spread. His foot sprung. So he said, All right, do it. Well, the next day, as the old man came across Bifrost, suddenly on the other side, there was the most beautiful, the most glorious, the most utterly scintillatingly lovely mare anyone could ever see. And Frafir, Odin's mount, was a brave horse. He was a strong horse. Without him, the great walls would never have been made. But there was one thing he also was. He was like his master, lusty. And so, with a sudden joy, he reared up, casting all the nails, all the many studs, all the paraphernalia that were going to fix the very gates of heaven, all through the world. And before the old man could stop him, he had ran after Loki, for Loki had taken the shape of that she-mare, and Loki, who had made himself faster than anything, had already run into the far east, up by Fenris. And Frafir followed him, and was gone. And then the old man turned in fury and said, You've tricked me! And One Eye said, What if I have? I did not say what the penalty clause if you did not build the wall was, did I? And the old man said, No. And Odin smiled and said, It is but this, your death. And the old man started to swell, and the old man started to grow, and he changed, and he grew from an old man wizened by time to how he had been in his very youth, one of the great giants by which the world was made, the mighty frost giant that stands at the very pinnacle of time. And he stood, and he got ready to smash heaven that he had not yet finished, and then take Odin and destroy him. But just at that moment, Thor came back. Thor came riding, and with him all his host. And not taking care to find out who was in the right and who was in the wrong, Thor took the holy hammer that may only be truly used in a just cause, and threw it in the great frost giant's forehead. It alone being the one weapon that must cleave every giant's skull. It broke the giant's head, and the giant fell back, dead, and a mighty roar, melting as he fell to earth, becoming at last that mighty ocean that girds all the western shore. But his blood stained the bright fields of Asgard, and lies still at the root of the foundation of its gate, so that it must go at last, when the hound barks Garm loud at the very end of time. And Loki was gone for 9 months or more. And when he came back, he had a twinkle in his eye. And the Norns smiled and snorted. And if you asked them, they would have told you he had given birth to a dragon that would one day devour the sun and moon.